Hi, it's Lori from LoriStory.com. Welcome to another Cricut tutorial. Today I have this fun Mr. and Mrs. card that has an acetate card base. This card could be used for any occasion and it's super easy to put together. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is create new project. We're going to go to Insert Images. We're going to click on Cartridges. And type in Craft in the search bar. This will bring up the Cricut Craft Room Basics. This is a free cartridge for everyone. Whether you have a subscription or not, you have these images to use for free. And most of the images we need for this card are included in this cartridge. Okay, we need this scalloped square. We need this square. We need this label. And that's it for that cartridge. Let's go to All Images. We're going to click on Scoreline or Search Scoreline. We need that. And back in All Images, we want to find a heart. Actually, we could have got the heart from the craft room. I should have got that from there. And the heart. So let's insert images. Okay, we're going to set our images aside. We're first going to work with the square. Set this aside. So our score line and our heart. Okay, to start, we're going to need several squares. So when I look over in the layers panel, I see that this square has a shadow layer. And since we're going to be duplicating this, I don't want to duplicate all those shadow layers that we're not going to be using. So let's turn on this shadow layer. And then let's pull the layers panel down so that we can see both the layers panel and the edit panel. At the bottom of the layers panel, when you have an item selected, you have some options here. We want to ungroup. And then we're going to go back to that black shadow layer and delete. Let's select the square again. And let's go over here in the bottom of the layers panel and let's duplicate that 3 more times. Actually 4 more times. Okay. So we're going to move these other squares over here. And the first one we're going to work on is the square that will be the base of the card, which we're going to be cutting out of transparency. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the square in the layers panel, and I'm going to change this to a really light gray. And that is just to remind me when I'm cutting it that this is transparency that I'm cutting this out of. And I'm going to choose a light gray by clicking on the gray and then choosing up here, just up from the gray. So that's the color I'm going to use to represent transparency. The next thing I want to do is go over to the edit panel. I'm going to unlock the keep proportions and I'm going to change this to 5 inches wide by 10 inches tall. This is going to be a 5 by 5 card when it's finished. So that's going to be my transparency piece. The next thing I want to do is add the score line. We're going to need 2 score lines, so let's go ahead and, while that is selected, duplicate it. And then let's just grab 1 score line. And if we look over in the edit panel, we can change this to 5 inches wide. It actually says height because of the direction it's turned. Let's hold our shift key and rotate. If you hold your shift key, this kind of locks into place in 45 degree increments. So we're going to set this about where we think the center of the card is. And then we're going to click on the card base and you can see here where the center is. Let's hit Arrange, Move to Back. Okay, now we can see our score line, and if we click on the rectangle we can move it so that that score line is exactly centered by the crosshair that's right in the middle of the rectangle. So we know that's perfectly centered. So let's select both, right click and attach. And this is our card base. Again, we're going to cut that in transparency. The next layer we need is a piece that's going to set right here. We know that this is a 5 by 5 square. So let's grab another square. We're going to go over to the layers panel, click on it, and I'm going to change this to the gray. I'm going to go up to the edit panel, and I'm going to change this to 4.75. I left the keep proportions locked, and that makes a perfect square. So let's click on the card base and let's just send that to the back, because that's always going to be our bottom layer. So this is going to fit right there. Okay, the next layer that's going to go on top of that is our scallop square. We want to go over to the edit panel, unlock keep proportions, and we want to make this 4.5 by 4.5. We're going to find the layer over here in the edit panel, click on it, and let's change that to white. All right, so we can arrange, move to front, and there is our card base. That's going to be glued together exactly like you see it. The next piece we're going to make is the folded piece that goes inside the card. So we're going to select another square. I'm going to select it in the layers panel, and I'm going to switch this to a green color. I'm going to be cutting this out in a white and green pattern paper, but I want to make sure it's a different color. So we're going to go up to the edit panel, unlock keep proportions, and we are going to make this 4.25. Actually, let's make this 4.00 by 8. Okay, so this is going to fold in half and glue right down to this piece. We need to add a score line. So let's pick up our score line. Over in the edit panel, let's change this to 4.00. Holding our shift key, we're going to rotate it. We're going to place it about where we think the center is. And just a little tip, sometimes it's hard to grab the score line. If you can't get it, select off of it and then select it, and it usually will grab it a little bit easier. Okay, so that looks like about center. All we have to do is select the rectangle underneath of it and make sure it is centered. That looks great. Select both of those, right click, and attach. So that is our card base that will be glued. So that is our card base that will be glued right here and then fold down. All right, the next thing we need is our Mr. and Mrs. Well, actually, we're going to go to the label. Let's go to the label. The label is going to set on the front of this when it's... The next thing we need is the label. The label is going to be glued to the top outside of this card. This transparency is going to be folded down, and the label will be placed on front of that. So I'm just kind of getting an idea of about how big I want that. That looks actually about right. It is, if we look in the edit panel, 3.49 by 2.28. So that's going to be our next layer. All right, now we need this rectangle. And we're going to go over to the edit panel, unlock keep proportions, and we're going to make this 5 inches wide. That's how wide our main card was, by 1.5 inches in height. And this is going to set over this label like that. So let's select it in the layers panel and let's change it to white. All right, that looks perfect. Next, we're going to take the last rectangle or square that we have, and we're going to make this a rectangle by unlocking keep proportions in the edit panel. And we're going to change this to 4.75 by 1.25. We're going a 1/4 inch smaller than this rectangle was. We're going to hit arrange, move to front, and center that over the top of this one. That looks pretty good. We'll select on it. We'll find it in our layers panel, and I'm just going to change it to white, and then I'm going to click on write, and I'm going to change it to this candy crystal color, and that's going to make the pen right on top of that. But in order for Design Space to know that we want the pen to write on that very piece, we need to attach that. So we're going to select both, right click, attach. All right, next thing we need is add text. We are going to type Mr. in all caps. Oops. Mr. in all caps. I'm going to go over here in the edit panel, and I'm going to change all fonts to has writing style. That first one that comes up is the Cricut alphabet, and that's the one I want to use. And I'm going to set that right there. And that looks great. I'm going to click on it in the layers panel, and I'm going to change that one also to the candy crystal. And make sure it's on right, it should be. And then click off of it. Now we're going to add text again, and we're going to type Mrs. in all caps. Enter. Oops. And select off. And I'm going to place this right here. I'm going to click on it in the layers panel, and I'm going to change that to the candy crystal color as well. Make sure it's on right, it is. And again, we want to make sure Design Space knows that we want this written right where it is. So we need to select all, right click, and attach. So there's our Mr. and Mrs. That leaves us with some hearts. I'm just going to make this small, and I'm going to duplicate it 4 more times. I like to do embellishments in uneven numbers. So there's our hearts. And actually, I think I'm going to change this to just pink. I'm going to cut it in silver glitter paper, but I'm just going to change it to pink just so that it's different than the others and I can remember. And rather than go through and change each one, I'm just going to go over here to the sync panel, and I'm going to pull this brown layer up to the pink layer. And now those are all pink. One other thing you can do, I'm actually going to use a chipboard ampersand sign, but if you want to cut one out, you can do that. So we'll go to Insert Images, All Images, and we're going to type in and, A-N-D. We're going to go to Cartridges. We're going to type in Heritage. View all images. And there is an ampersand right there. You can use this one if you want. Insert Images. And again, a lot of you have chipboard pieces in your scrapbooking supply, and the ampersand rarely gets used, so that's what I'm going to use. But if you want to cut it out, you can do that. And I would probably cut this in gray. So back over in the sync button, I would pull this down and cut that in the same color gray. So that's it. Let's hit go and let's cut this out and assemble.